talking about WordPress on a very kind of basic level. So if you kind of came here hoping to talk about extensive customizations to WordPress or anything like that, this is going to be on a much lower level. This is kind of like the 80-mile-per-hour drive through how to use WordPress. So, and the way I've structured this is initially I'll just kind of give you like WordPress basics, what's a CMS, what is it that makes WordPress different, and then I'll get into, I'll switch out of presentation mode and kind of give you a tour of the back-end interface, which is what you use to actually make edits to your website, right? So, with that in mind, okay. So, my name is Paul Crosby, and I'm a web developer specializing in WordPress, JavaScript, PHP, Ruby, HTML, and CSS. If you have questions after this presentation is over, definitely feel free to reach out to me. That's my email, and that's my cell phone number. And so I'll leave that up here for a second. And yeah, any questions that you might have, I'm more than happy to answer them. This is kind of what I do. I do most of the websites that I build, I would say, are in WordPress, so I would definitely have no problem fielding any questions you might have. So. Okay, so I'm going to start off with just some basic definitions here. And does everyone here know what a CMS is, by chance? Pretty familiar? Content management system. It is what it sounds like. It's basically just an application. It's normally web-based, and it's used to create and manage content. So essentially, it is a platform to build a website, in our case. And on a more practical level, CMSs help you build a website without having to code from scratch. So, I mean, the idea is that, especially when I set up clients in WordPress, that you never have to really look at a line of code, and you can still manage the site on your own. That's kind of like the beauty of WordPress. And there's a lot of features in WordPress, or CMSs more generally, that are actually very hard to program, but when done within a content management system are quite easy. Things like user management and giving different permissions to different user groups, adding and editing content, tracking revisions, maintaining dynamic content. What I mean there is like a blog loop or something that is maybe customizable to certain users, right? Okay, so this is just an idea of competitors to WordPress, to give you an idea. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these. A lot of these, like Squarespace and Wix, are a little bit different in that they're, I guess, more proprietary. You generally have to pay for them. Whereas something like Joomla is very, very similar to WordPress. Magento is more of an e-commerce platform, and Drupal is probably the most complex out of all of these, but I would say WordPress is by far the most widely used. And we can see that here. I just kind of wanted to illustrate the market share of WordPress in terms of CMSs out there. 60% of all websites that are managed on content management systems are run by WordPress. So it's pretty impressive in terms of how big it is. And this, okay, so I'm going to show you something. And this kind of blows my mind, but I think it will too. So WordPress powers 34.1% of all websites on the web, which is a lot. And it's not the kind of thing that shows any sign of slowing down. In 2011, it was 13.1%, and year after year, it grows at a fairly consistent rate. So they're doing something right, and there's a reason it's so popular. It's really easy to use, and yeah, and I think you'll come to see that as we kind of go through this presentation. It's really meant for those who aren't necessarily tech, into coding. So I'm going to give you a few examples of, a lot of people think that WordPress is this platform that is used by like really small blogs or something like that. But the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of huge websites, from very large companies that use WordPress. For example, I'm just going to flip through a few sites that might surprise you are actually WordPress sites. TechCrunch, New Yorker, BBC America, MTV News, Walt Disney, WhiteHouse.gov, the official website of Sweden. So, yeah, I mean, it can handle pretty robust, heavy traffic. So, before I move on, kind of to like the more nitty-gritty part of the presentation, I'll just kind of give you some defining features of WordPress. So it's open source, which is basically, and this is a very kind of simplified definition of what open source is, but it's software for which the original source code is made freely available and may be redistributed and modified. The opposite of this model of software would be like proprietary software, which we're all familiar with. I mean, and Salesforce or Microsoft Office. You can't go in and edit the source code for those. It's also extensible, and this to me is the beauty of WordPress. So it's like I said in the previous definition, it can be modified. It basically allows for the addition of all sorts of new design features and functionality. There's actually 50,000 custom themes and plugins that are available for free according to the WordPress site, wordpress.org. And we'll explore a lot of those in the course of this presentation. Another great thing about WordPress is it has a huge support community. So let's say if I'm developing on WordPress and I'm having a problem, I can literally Google that problem, and 9 times out of 10 someone else has had the exact same problem before and can kind of walk me through it. That's it's the benefit of having this huge, robust kind of development community. It also makes, like I said earlier, user management, permissions, things like that tend to be baked into the actual code. One thing I want to make a distinction of, and this is something that confused me early on, is that there's actually 2 flavors of WordPress. So there's WordPress.com, and then there's WordPress.org. I included a link here, which is actually it's an infographic that kind of, I think does a really good job of explaining the difference between the two. WordPress.com is essentially not a self-hosted platform, meaning that you would sign up for an account on WordPress.com and you would get a URL that says, whatever you want, my domain name .wordpress.com. Whereas the self-hosted version requires you to have a hosting account, and you download WordPress.org onto that hosting account, right? So generally speaking, WordPress.com, because it's meant to be just kind of used out of the box, there's no plugins or themes really. It is what it is, and there's nothing else really to it. Whereas WordPress.org, which is what we're going to be really focusing on today, is fully customizable. There's different plugins, themes, all sorts of things that you can do. I mean, you can basically make your site into anything you want it to be using WordPress.org. And because of that, that's what I'm focusing on today. That statistic that I gave you earlier about 34.1% of all websites running WordPress is based on WordPress.org. Okay, so that's kind of like my really kind of basic explanation of what WordPress is. So is there any questions just here from the get-go? There's not many of you here, so I feel free to ask questions, pipe in, that sort of thing. Anyone? Pretty clear? Yeah. Okay, cool. So for the rest of the presentation, my plan here is to kind of switch out of, I don't want to just show you slides. I'd rather just go into the actual backend and show you how it works and how to perform various functions. So I'm switching out of slideshow mode and into the actual WordPress interface. And what I did was I just basically downloaded a totally vanilla install of WordPress on my local machine. This isn't something you really have to worry about, but if the internet gave out or something like that, this website is not affected because the web server is actually running on my computer, if that makes sense. And typically when you develop people like me, when we develop WordPress sites, we do so locally. So what you see here is the free theme that kind of comes out of the box with WordPress when you install it. Everything here, I didn't actually touch anything to kind of give you an idea really how it looks out of the box. So I'm going to navigate here. You'll see up here it says Migrate Blog, and by clicking this, you can toggle between the front end, which is how your site actually looks, and the back end, which is the administrative side that gives you access to all the features and things that you want to edit, right? So we're going to go there. This is very basically the administrative back end, right? And we're just kind of going to go through a lot of these, especially along the sidebar. You'll see posts, media pages, appearance, plugins, tools, and settings. And I'm going to go through the most basic ones and the most important ones for you. So with that in mind, I'm going to start off with, see down here under settings, I'm going to start with general settings, okay? So up here, can you visit?
Can't see it better.
Oh, really? Sorry. Feel free, if you're having a similar problem, to just move forward. So we have here the general settings for the site. This is really important because, see the site title and the tagline? That's what it actually appears in your Google listing. So I'll give you an example. Let's go to Google. I'm going to just do a basic Google search of, it's kind of echoey. So I'll just search Startup Spokane. I misspelled it, great. Okay, so corrected me. Anyway, so you'll see here kind of a division between, home and Startup Spokane. And so what this is basically is the division that you see back here, the site title and the tagline. That's going to be directly indexed in Google. So just something to keep in mind. The next is your email address. You're going to want this to be your, an email address that you check regularly. You'll get notifications for updates that need to happen, to plugins, your theme. And it's very important, and we'll discuss this a little bit later, to keep things up to date, because I will tell you that one of the biggest downsides of using WordPress, and this is often a problem in open source projects where the code is freely available for everyone to see, is that it can be hacked. And if you do not keep your plugins up to date, it's a great way to get your site hacked, which no one wants. So, yeah. Okay, we're going to cover that in a second, but you'll see over here on the sidebar, plugins. Basically, plugins, and I'll just explain this really briefly, are are essentially extensions of WordPress that enhance the functionality of your site in some particular way. For example, let's say you want to have a contact form on your site. Most sites want that, right? There's a ton of plugins out there that are really easy to install that you can use to display a contact form on your page. That's just one example. There's a lot. Believe it or not, if you can think of something, that you want on your site, some kind of piece of unique functionality, chances are there's a plugin out there that does it already for you. But that being said, you have to be careful, and you also have to not install too many. A lot of people go crazy. I have one client right now who has like 70 plugins installed, and granted they have a very complex site, but each one of those plugins does slow your site down a little bit, so don't get too crazy. So, moving on. Oh yeah, time zone. This is the only other thing I'm going to touch on real quick. Since we're in, Pacific time, it's UTC -7, I think. And and then save. So you just want basically all of your publication information, all of your times are now going to be correct and in the current time zone. So, going down to reading, I'm going to skip writing for now just because I have very limited time.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
On that page,
Yeah, sure.
the check mark that said anyone can register.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you would recommend checking?
It depends.
So, like, make it open to anybody?
No, so basically, and we're going to get into this when I talk a little bit about user management. The new user default role, see underneath there it says subscriber. Basically, that's a very low level of access that someone has that doesn't give them really any rights to do much with your site.
Okay.
So, but it really depends. Oftentimes, you know, for my personal WordPress site, I don't really have a blog. I'm just kind of displaying my services, so I don't want really new people registering all the time. But if you run like a comment-driven website where it's important that customers say leave reviews for products that you might be selling, then you're going to want to allow new people to register. Okay, so the important one here under reading is what your homepage looks like. Now, you have two choices here. Some people, and this depends on what kind of content you have, want like a blog loop on their homepage. Think any news site, right? We're going to make a distinction between posts and pages in a second here, but that's what is going on here. And then a static page is if you just want, you know, just general content to appear, and again, we'll discuss what pages are. That's where you would set that. And then you can specifically set in those drop downs. So let's say I want to have a static page. There's no pages really in here yet because it's a brand new WordPress install. You can just select from the drop down, and you can basically select which page is your home page, right? So basically when someone goes to your base URL, startupspokane.com, that's the page they're going to get directed to. So, moving on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about discussion here, not much because there's a lot here, but this is essentially where you can kind of set the tone and impose certain limitations on your site. So, for example, comment moderation. When a comment contains any of these words in its content, you know, it will be held in a moderation queue. Or blacklist, you know, so let's say you don't want to allow profanity on your website, you can, you know, I won't demonstrate, but, you know, you type in any swear word that you don't want to appear in comments, and you can essentially blacklist those comments, and also probably the commenters who post those. Avatars, so again, once again, this is for kind of discussion-driven sites. Default is to show avatars, but you also want to maybe control what people have on their avatar, and you know, generally I just leave mine in G, and it's not really an issue, but once again, you're just setting the tone for what kind of website you want to have. Okay, next setting is media. I'm going to go through real quick. So this is I'm just going to do this really quick. This is where you set your default thumbnail size. I'm not going to get a lot into this, but essentially a thumbnail is a small version of an image that you upload. So let's say you upload an image to your WordPress site and it's like 1,000 pixels by 800 pixels. WordPress also generates a separate one that's about how, and this is where you define how big that thumbnail is. Typically, it's useful in like profile pictures or featured images, blog posts, that sort of thing. And then down here, under uploading files, you'll see organizer uploads into month, year-based folders. This just kind of is a way to structure your content. So sometimes you want your content to be divided into, let's say, I think 2019, a 2019 folder, and inside the 2019 folder there's going to be a June folder, right? And it makes it easier to find things going backward, so I recommend actually getting that checked. Permalinks, this is pretty important too, especially for SEO and indexing. Here you can define how you want your URLs to be displayed. You know, and different people have different needs. these here, so I'm not going to recommend one, but I will say don't use this one. See how it says it's basically querying, meaning searching a database for a post ID, and that is horrible for SEO. I mean, a search engine doesn't know what to make of that in terms of what kind of content is on that page. So generally, I know the post name, but some people, including Brandon, who I don't think is here right now, do category post name. So it just depends on your needs. And so yeah, those are the basic settings here. Privacy is more about having a privacy page, and I'm not going to cover that just since I'm limited in time. Anyone have questions about the basic settings for a WordPress site? Does that all make sense? Okay, cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a post. Now, here I'm going to make a little distinction between posts and pages. I think a better word for a post, it's kind of vague. I would think of it in terms of maybe article. An article that has metadata attached to it, like author, probably a date of publication, and various things like that. Typically, they appear in what's known as a loop, and a loop is just essentially a collection of usually your most recent blog posts, but they can also be organized according to category. So I'm going to just go through the process of creating a new post, and it's very simple. You hover on top of the post, you just click Add New. So and then here you would be able to enter a title, and then some content. I'll get to categories here in a second, but categories are essentially ways of grouping your posts into different categories. So let's say you have, I don't know, you run a news site, right? And you want to make a distinction between, let's say, U.S. news and international news. Maybe you would have a category for international news and another one for U.S. or domestic news. And you could create categories really for anything that you want, depending upon your content. So categories are basically how you group your content, and posts are the individual items that are grouped together, if that makes sense. So all I would do here is say, you write your content here, whatever the content of your article. And again, it's very much, this by the way toggles an additional set of features here for editing, this little icon right there. And you can put any content here that you want. Text, you could embed a video, you could insert images. It's all really, really easy. So this add media, this is how you would add an image, and media library. So there's nothing here, obviously. So I'm just going to see if I can find an image from one of my current projects. So then basically you just click that, upload, and here you have a few options to attach some metadata to your image. The one thing I would recommend is putting alt text. Alt text is an important feature for accessibility. So let's say someone's on a screen reader or something that doesn't display images, or they have a poor internet connection and the images don't load. This is a description of what is actually contained in the image. And it's good for SEO purposes, obviously, because it gives search engines a clear idea of what this image actually is. And as far as alignment is concerned, you can put it to the left, so your text will float to the right, or to the right, vice versa. And then you can set different sizes. You can do the full size of the image, which is what I'll do here. And I'll put left line, and I'll say insert post, and there you go, right? And then you just continue writing content.
Do you care what type of file it is, JPEG or
It depends on what you're going for. PNGs obviously preserve transparency kind of in the background. So let's say you don't want like, let's say your image is truly speaking like like a rectangle, right? You don't want like a weird white background on top of like another white background, you use a PNG. But generally you use a PNG, a JPEG, I think you can upload a GIF. So one of those three things. No, not necessarily. For bigger images, I actually use JPEGs because you can actually lower the quality on them in Photoshop because you want to be careful. The bigger the image, the slower the page load time. And here's a crazy statistic. A site that takes longer than 3 seconds to load, I think like you lose 40% of your perspective traffic.
Yeah.
People are pretty impatient, especially on mobile.
So JPEG and lower resolution.
Yes, that's what I would recommend, or PNG if necessary. But yeah. Any other questions so far here?
So in terms of edited content, if you were doing it in Word, how much formatting,
Oh, copy
just copy
and
and paste will be supported or dropped?
Yes, so that's a great question. And believe it or not, so WordPress, it used to be pretty bad. It used to throw in all sorts of really weird formatting. Now, it's actually, it's surprisingly good. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to take a random Word file and I'll just kind of demonstrate. So where did it go? Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste some of this, right? And I'm just going to paste it. Make sure to see it in the top right hand corner where it says visual and text. In this case, you want to preserve some of the formatting from Word, right? So leave it on visual. If you copy it as text, it won't preserve any of the formatting, which sometimes you do want, right? And then you can format it in the editor. So I click paste, and you'll see it's an unordered list, bold text, and I can even look at the HTML to see that we're not going to talk about this, but the HTML is clean, and there's not a whole lot of ridiculous formatting in there. So that's good.
But if you use Word art or something else in Word, that would or wouldn't.
It would, you mean like an image or something?
Well, the stylized,
Like headings and that sort of thing?
yeah.
Let's say you're posting a newsletter and you have like a blue font, a
Mhm.
paragraph.
It'll copy over.
But you have to be visual.
Make sure it's on the visual tab. And oftentimes, it does happen that, this is still not necessarily a perfect transformation from one platform to the other. So, if, let's say something doesn't copy over right, you can always make the edits here. So let's say, oh, this text is supposed to be italicized. You can just make it italicized, although it could just disappear.
Yeah.
But I'll just go back and set the text color to black, right? So
I guess I was thinking more like text shadowing and stuff like that.
text shadowing is not available here. No,
Right.
no. That would be a more advanced CSS feature, which would require a little bit of custom coding. It's not hard,
No.
but
But anybody could do it in Word and copy and paste, but it wouldn't be preserved.
I don't think so.
Is there a plugin for it?
Probably, like text shadow, there might be. I know it actually, so we'll get into this in a second, but I'm going to make a distinction between themes and plugins.
Yeah.
That would typically be more of a feature of a theme. Now, this isn't always the case, but themes tend to be more the presentation of your content, whereas plugins tend to be more about added functionality, like I mentioned earlier, a contact form. So typically those stylistic things that you're talking about are would be included in a theme. So, yeah. I am on some version of 5, but not the latest one. As you can see, because it's triggering me for an update here. Editor, exactly. Yeah, it's good. So what I'm going to do is actually run an update. So what I'm going to do is say, please update now. And I'm going to leave, actually, you know what, I'm going to say this, so I'll just say publish. And you'll see, all it does is wait a second, and then publish, post publish, you'll see this little bar here. What you can even do is publish it in the future, and you can schedule posts. So let's say you want it to drop at 6 in the morning tomorrow. You can do that. Another great thing, well, I'll show this to you in a second. Okay. So that's the process of creating pages. Any questions here? All pretty clear?
Do you get like a notification when it's published?
There's a plugin for that.
Okay.
No, there really is. So, but by default, as an administrator, you wouldn't be notified of every post you publish. Okay, so moving on. The next big one is a page, right? Now this is, let's say you have a small business and you want to describe your services, right? This would be the perfect place to create, this would be ideal for a WordPress page, right? Because it's the kind of content that's not going to change a lot, that's just kind of there. And what I'm going to say is add new. And there's a lot of really cool features in here. So again, it's very similar, but before I get into pages, I'm going to run the WordPress update like we were just talking about. So I'm going to go here. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It kind of doesn't necessarily feel urgent all the time, but you really want to keep everything up to date. I remember I was working for a web development company back in like 2014, and literally every single one of our websites got hacked because of a plugin that wasn't updated, and it turned into some kind of like, it was like this, every one of our sites turned into like this anti-Israel, like, with like music playing in the background, and like, it was a disaster. So, long story short, just update your plugins. So now it's downloading the core update, right? And you'll see over here that you have little notifications that kind of alert you to pending updates, to either plugins for your theme. Why if I hear it feels kind of slow today?
Yeah.
I hope this doesn't cause a problem, but I'm going to switch over to this. This actually may cause a problem. Jeez.
I have a question all the way.
Yeah.
So, I have a very simple WordPress site with SiteGround, and I don't have a local copy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not happy with SiteGround, so I want to move. What do I do? Is there some way to save a local copy and then I can move to another provider and upload the same WordPress site?
Is that a hosting company you just
Yes,
mentioned?
SiteGround's one of these hosting.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a few things you can do. There's a great plugin out there called MigrateDB, okay? And what it does is it exports the entire database behind your WordPress install. And you can do that, and then you're going to want to download all of the files that exist on the server, right? And then have those locally, and then you have everything you need to put it on a new
So
server.
the MigrateDB doesn't, I have to separately download all the files.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's two parts to this.
Okay.
There's the database, which is where most of your content is stored, and then there are your files. Those are like template logic and that sort of thing. So you have to do both. But you don't have to, by the way, download the entire WordPress install. I would just stick to the WP content folder, and I can kind of show you, if you want to even show me afterwards what you're dealing with, I can kind of give you an idea of what that would look like.
So a hoster you like?
Yeah, for sites like this, I think, frankly, in terms of price and performance, GoDaddy is really
That's
good.
where I was going to go.
Yeah. Customer service is great. You can call them really any time, and they've been able to solve just about everything that I can handle. Oh boy, this is pretty lame. Let's Let's see what's going on here. Okay, I'm gonna try one more time, and then I'm gonna give up. Another update is currently in progress. Okay. Usually it's fairly instantaneous. I think there's something going on with the Wi-Fi here. Because, like I said earlier, this is a local install, but to actually install the update, it has to go out and actually retrieve that from the interwebs. So, anyway, I'll just kind of move forward, and we'll get back to that. So creating a page, again, kind of going back here. So here's our sample page. There's already some content built in here, and I'm not going to actually make any edits to this. It's very similar to creating a post. It just doesn't, it's not an article. It doesn't appear in a loop. It's more, I think this is where you put your services page that just kind of lists out what you do, or maybe the About Our Company page or company history. Those are all great candidates for pages.
Usually comments and stuff, I'll show up on pages and stuff.
No.
Yeah, so,
No, they don't.
you know, if you want pages where people aren't making comments on that, that's good.
Yeah. So, well, I'm going to show this. I'm just trying to think the best way to order this. Okay, at the top of your website, typically you have a menu. We all know what a menu is, right? Where you kind of, list your important services. For example, I'm just kind of harping on my startup Spokane example. These are like the main pages of the site, right? So, but you have to create it just by creating a page. You're not necessarily adding it to your menu, right? So, what you have to do is hover on top of appearance, then click on, I haven't activated it. Oh, no, it is. So I'm just going to call this header, and then I'm just saying create menu. Now what happens is all of your pages that you've created appear here on the left-hand side, and it's basically, you click it and say add to menu, save menu. Oh, and one other thing that I just forgot to do, but you want to do is that top menu pages, top menu link, and it'll appear at the top of your website. It'll be your main menu. I'm going to add this first. Yeah. Another cool thing about this interface is it's drag and drop. And let's say you want that sample page, let's say you want this to be a sub-page of this, right? All you have to do is hold on it, and drag it in a little bit, and see how it's indented here? Now it's going to be a part of a drop down for that item. So let's say you have an about page, hover on top of an about, it'll show you, history and, executive committee or whatever. That's what that's for. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go to the front end just to show this to you real quick. Once again, I'll go back and forth just like over there. And you'll see that our one sample page is there, and see that little drop down, sample page, there it is. And by the way, since it's showing our latest post, you remember this, it's actually displaying that on the home page. Does that all make sense so far?
So Paul, when this is scrolling down over that picture,
What's that?
this page is sort of scrolling down over that top picture.
Parallax,
What's that?
Oh, this right here?
Yeah.
Well, so it's actually not parallax because you'll see that it's close. Parallax moves, but at different speeds. This is just a fixed background image, right? So where, the image is attached to a specific place, and, your content will just scroll over it. So that's a setting in your CSS. Now, I
Turn
turn
it off.
turn it off, okay.
Yeah.
You make people turn it off. Again, that would depend upon through the settings, yeah. Oh, there. So I click on themes under appearance, and then you can click customize. And in this case, let's see, that's the site identity. A lot of these are shortcuts to other places in the settings section.
So they duplicate something
That's also in settings, yeah. They kind of make it easier for you. You can even toggle out your theme here if you want. I'll show that to you in a second. But as far as the header image is concerned, header. So it's actually separate. So here's the current image, right? And no, for this one, there's no option to turn it off. Although it would be pretty easy to, you can actually see what it looks like in mobile here, which is really important, obviously. So, unfortunately, for this particular theme, no. But most themes wouldn't have that by default, or at least you could set it. Yeah. So anyway, that's how you create a menu. That's how you build out a menu. That's how you make sub-items for your menu. Does that all make? That's pretty clear, right? Yes. Okay, I'm going to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. You were talking about, how do I migrate content from one WordPress site? Let's say I want to get it off of this one platform and move it to another platform. If you haven't made intense customizations to your theme, there's actually an easier way than that old database migrate I was telling you about. There's actually an easier way. What you're going to want to do is go to your current WordPress website. You see this item that says Tools and Export. What this does is it exports all of your content. Now, if you have, again, any kind of customizations to your theme, it's not going to export that. It's going to export an XML file. So you just click Download Export File, and there's the XML file. The downloads, there it is, right? And then I could go to my new WordPress website and then see where, right here where it says import. See right here? You would go to import, and then you would import that XML file.
So you set up a website, blank website, and then go ahead and say,
Yes, the XML file. If it's only content that you're worried about, that's how you do it.
does that bring the theme, or do I set up a website with the theme first?
I would set up the website with the first, and it kind of depends. So, it can get tricky. But again, if you're using the default theme for WordPress, those are already included by default. If you're using a different theme, you may have to reinstall that theme on the new platform. Okay, right? Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to skip to the kind of heart of, I think, the most interesting thing about the presentation, which is plugins and themes, right? This is what makes this is where WordPress is really, really cool. So I'm going to, once again, try to make a distinction that makes sense between plugins and themes. So a theme, I'm going to compare the website. Let's say your website is a car. The theme is like your car's exterior. It controls the visual aspect of your website, the design, colors, layout, etc., right? Whereas plugins, let's say plugins are like the exterior of the car, but think of them as like add-ons or modifications to your car. Think of like a GPS system, a stereo, heated seats, I don't know. They add some piece of functionality to your website. So that's kind of the difference. Now, I'm going to kind of give you some tips here as far as must-have plugins, and then I'm going to also list a few very popular plugins that businesses typically use. But there's certain plugins, believe it or not, that almost every website that I create in WordPress, almost every site has these plugins. So, for example, I'm going to go here. Well, first, I'm going to look at my installed plugins, right? And here we have anti-spam. Don't worry about Hello Dolly. It's the WordPress founder has a fascination with jazz. And then user switching. I was going to demonstrate user management with that in a second. But we go to add new. Yeah.
Go back to plugins and they're already
It depends. For example, Hello Dolly, you absolutely don't need it. Just click delete, delete, nothing's going to happen. Plugin's just gone. That is something you absolutely want. That's one of my must-have plugins. So what I would do is just, but as you can see, it's not activated. So you want to activate it. I'm not going to activate it here because it involves getting a key from an external website. But I can show you guys how to do that afterwards. Moving on to adding an additional plugin. As you can see, it's already here. Since it's expired, I'm going to update it, and it updates right here in this interface. One cool thing is that you can sort by popular. This is all actually, it's usually instantaneous. I mean, these things aren't like really. Okay, there it is. So moving on to popular. It's like, what is going on here? So, I mean, here I'm actually relying, unfortunately, on this URL. Okay. Yoast SEO. You'll see that right here. Then there's a few of these. I think a lot of them are about equal. There's another one called All-in-One SEO. But this makes the SEO process so much easier. It kind of notifies you about, the way your keywords are kind of thrown about through your content or anything else like that. I can't emphasize how important this is. And you definitely want to have some kind of SEO plugin. It makes the process so much easier. I would recommend some kind of contact form. There's contact form 7. Personally, I don't like this one as much because it actually doesn't store the submissions in a database. It's just form to email, at least last time I checked. There's another one called Ninja Forms that has a free version. And what I'll do is I'll just search Ninja Forms. And we'll see it right here. Incompatible. So it's because I need to update my version of WordPress, obviously. But I would just install this plugin and we'd be good to go. So that's another really important one. And it's good because you can just go to the back end and see all of your form submissions right there. Another big one is Wordfence. So remember how I said that WordPress is really, really hackable? Wordfence is a great plugin to have. To kind of this will do a lot of things to kind of lock down your site and make it more secure. So you want to have a security plugin. Now, a lot of these plugins, by the way, are what are known as freemium, which means that you can get most of the features that you need for free. But if you want certain premium features, you actually have to upgrade to get it. Yeah, and usually it's like at maybe $10 or something like that. So I'm going to just click install now. And another thing to keep an eye on is see how you see 1 million active installations. It's really important, to kind of just keep an eye on. I mean, if it has 50 installations and no reviews, it's pretty untested. So I would think hard about adding that to your site. So anyway, we've installed this now, and see down here how there's a new Wordfence plugin. Here we can do a lot of stuff. We can ban certain IP addresses. Let's say you're getting a bunch of attempts to hack your site. Here, I'm just going to leave out of this for now. They want me to upgrade. And you can set all of that stuff back here. If I had the latest version of WordPress, by the way, it would be performing a lot better, I think. I think that might be part of my problem. I just installed what I thought was the latest version, but I evidently didn't get that. So let's see, another really important plugin is there's something called WPSSO. So this will enable you to have let's say you share something on social media on your site. You know those shared posts that you see that have a really nice image and they just look nice? WPSSO allows you to kind of set your meta content, if you will, in a certain way so that your posts will appear nice when you share them on social media, right? Does that make sense? That's another big one. I'm going to switch over to popular plugins for businesses, and these are ones that I use frequently. One of them is WooCommerce. WooCommerce basically enables you to create an e-commerce site out of your existing WordPress install. It's awesome. You can get most of the features for free. I mean, if you're thinking about selling things on your website, you have to be careful because if you're collecting credit card information, you have to have what's known as an SSL certificate, which usually costs about $70 from your hosting company. So keep that in mind. Another thing that I like to have on most of the business websites that I have are share buttons. So like, let's say I want to easily share posts across, different platforms. You've seen that probably on different sites where you scroll down to the bottom of a page or a post and you see share this on this platform, and you'll see icons for maybe Facebook, Twitter. The best one that I can think of is add to any shared plugins. Another really good one, and this is, again, to increase your traffic, is related posts for WordPress, which basically is, you've probably seen this as well, where someone scrolls to the bottom of a post, right? And you'll see, you might also want to read this post or that post, right? And it actually takes posts that have related content and it puts them down there. Users who are interested in the current article are likely to click on those and increase your overall traffic.
What was the one you recommended for sharing?
Add to any share buttons is a pretty good one. So again, let me ask you guys, is there any piece of functionality that you would like to have on your website that wouldn't necessarily be part of the, thinking of your own websites, what would you like there to be? Is there any feature that you would like on there that you think might exist as a plugin? Because chances are it exists. Nothing?
Well, let me ask you this. I have a WordPress site and I have a LinkedIn site for the company, and I kind of maintain them separately. Is there a way to link them or
You can
handle
embed.
that better?
You can embed it as, let's say, a feed. Let's say you want your most recent LinkedIn posts to appear on your WordPress site, right? You can have them appear as a feed on, like, maybe in your sidebar of your website, or you could have them, appear. You can just link to it, have a LinkedIn icon that appears at the top of your WordPress site. It depends how you want to integrate it, right? And you can integrate it in a number of different ways, either directly linking to it or just showing the activity on your account. Does that make sense?
What do companies do?
Typically, it depends where.
Small.
It depends where they're most active. I see a lot of businesses are active on Facebook, and so like those feed plugins are typically seen on. I typically see Facebook feeds on websites, but LinkedIn, it's the same. It's just as easy.
So they're posting in one place, and then Facebook, but then it shows up on the website.
Right.
I don't have a Facebook site. but I have a LinkedIn site. So
Right. The
it's-
same principle though.
Yeah.
Either way, if you post it on the LinkedIn site, it'll go on your WordPress site, and there's a plugin where you can actually post something on your WordPress site, and it will automatically post to all of your social media channels, LinkedIn. Let's see.
I use Hootsuite. Will Hootsuite post to
Hootsuite will post to all of your social media platforms,
not to the WordPress?
but not necessarily to the WordPress. The WordPress, you can have a plugin that will publish to the WordPress, and it will post to all of any social media platform that you have set up in your WordPress account. It'll post to those as well.
What's that called?
Let's see, what is there's a bunch of them. Oh, Jetpack.
Now, if I want to post on LinkedIn and have it show up here, is that a plugin?
No, that'll work with, that'll be fine. Like as long as your accounts are connected in the plugin, in Jetpack, for example,
Jetpack would put a feed here of everything I have on LinkedIn.
it depends what you want, yeah, but yes.
Okay.
Again, that's something that you can easily do without ever touching a line of code. So I'm getting near the end here. We're almost at the full hour. I wanted to show you really quick where to get themes and where to get plugins. So there are a few places here. So the kind of most basic one is just the wordpress.org site /themes. And here it'll list tons and tons of themes. And so like for example, there's 4,000 of them right here. You can kind of preview them first for the most part. Let's say you're interested in this one. Right now we don't have any content set, so we can't really see what it would fully do, but you know, again, it's very easy to install different themes. You can get a feel for what they look like in the screenshot. And you can also get a feel for how they perform based on the reviews, and this one has extremely good reviews. And that's just one example. So this is where you get free themes. But there's an entire industry built around theme development, and for about $60 at the most, you can purchase what's known as a premium theme. And you can purchase a theme for literally anything. Like let's say you run up an online learning academy. There are themes that are targeted for sites that publish courses and want to limit access to those courses, that sort of thing. And I'm going to show you that real quick. So if you go to probably the biggest repository of premium themes on the web is a site called Theme Forest. This one right here, the $60 theme has been bought about 22,000, or has been reviewed 22,000 times, it's been bought 1,400 times, so it's a very popular plugin. It'll let you live preview it. So for this particular theme, this is actually the most popular WordPress theme of all time. And it has an insane amount of features. There's even different, what they call skins for customization. So a driving school, a barber shop, cryptocurrency. And it goes on and on. Finance, university. So let's see what university does. So here's what this theme does if you are running a school, right? And it has specific features like courses, right, that are available to online academies. There's literally something for everyone. So this is a great resource if you're interested in purchasing a premium theme. And
So say you go into the premium theme, all your background is different, and they do that for you.
no, they make it really easy to do it. Like, so
I noticed that you get these WordPress, like a lot of settings where that
like starting with free and then going there.
Yeah, like a premium where the WordPress ongoing within the lead time and upgrade.
I think oftentimes, I mean, that model exists because it's very effective and it allows you to kind of test what this is going to look like, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think you necessarily have to do it that way. I think you can really find out by reputation and reviews, how well a theme performs. So I would say, yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is a very high quality theme, and you do get a lot for it. You just, have to pay $60.
Annually or
Once. So,
What's
that's
the website for search?
for free themes.
Yeah.
That's just simply Wordpress.org. And then you can search for themes, you can search for plugins too. So there's free themes and there's free plugins, yeah. Oh, the paid ones? Oh, yeah, that is Theme Forest. So,
And you can search by the kind of business you are.
yeah, so let's kind of just do this really quick. So, Theme Forest, right? Now they sell themes, by the way, for other platforms as well, like Joomla and the other CMSs we discussed earlier. But you can hover on top of WordPress and you'll see popular items, or you can kind of go by category, right? Corporate, creative, directory and listing, e-commerce, education, Elementor, which is an awesome plugin for like creating a drag and drop style interface on your website, right? Entertainment, nonprofit, real estate. I mean, again, really anything you want. And there's thousands of them on here. Once again, I would just say look at the reviews and make sure that you're not buying a clover. Elementor? Yeah, Elementor is amazing. There's a free version where you can do a lot with it as well. I would recommend at least looking into it because it has this really, really cool drag and drop interface. And so, yeah. Cool. It's also listed in the WordPress directory. Like, you can download it. Remember how we downloaded Wordfence earlier? You can download Elementor the same exact way. Any other questions? Again, this is such a broad topic. This was such a kind of a fast general overview of a very big topic, and I feel like it's the kind of presentation that lends itself to maybe a lot of questions. So if you, technically I guess the presentation's over, but if you have any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Do you think you might do other presentations for the next levels or have charts here more advanced?
No, this was meant to be a beginner one, but I don't know. I have nothing scheduled for a more advanced one.
Oh, okay. Well, so you were just approached by...
I work at a startup Spokane, so and because this is kind of my area of expertise, we're all recruited to give various presentations for different